So hi, I'm Tash. So I went to John Bentley between 2003 and 2010, I think, in the end, and then went to University of Leicester to do medicine. I now currently work as a doctor doing sort of medicine, which is based in it's basically working in a hospital but not surgery is the best way to describe it. And my specialty is I'm going to be someone who looks after old people, well, with a special interest in old people and sort of problems that happen to older people. So that's my role at the moment. I've just got a training job to do the old person training going forward. So yeah, that's sort of me in a nutshell, and then I can answer any more questions you have.
Do you like the environment that you work in?
Yes, lots. So I really like, the reason I work in a hospital and not in a GP surgery is that because I always wanted to be a GP, but when I did my job there, I found that actually the hospital is really friendly. There's loads of people working there, so you always feel like you've got some support. You get really good relationships with the nurses, the dietitians, the occupational therapists, everyone that you work with. And I just find that that environment is really friendly, and I like working in that. I also find like the hospital for me is quite an exciting environment. So you have sort of my day-to-day, which might just be a bit sort of mundane and kind of trickling around on a ward, but then I'll do on calls where I'm in charge of the whole hospital and running all of the emergency stuff. So that's really quite cool and sort of gets the adrenaline rush.
What for you was like the hardest part of becoming a doctor?
So I think one of the things that I found really hard sort of pre-medical school, which actually I don't know if he still works there, but Dr. Fellinall was quite responsible for fixing, was I wasn't very good at failing. And I know that sounds like a really like backwards modest thing, but I imagine if you're both thinking about healthcare, you're probably pretty good at school and don't normally do much failing. And actually learning that sometimes it's okay to fail and not do well in exams is not the end of the world, and learning those skills of how to deal with that is really, really important, and I found that quite hard. I think the other thing, which again makes me sound really egotistical, is I came from John Bentley where I was one of the top of the year and was used to being the smart person, and then I went to university where I was suddenly with 300 very, very smart people, a lot of whom were a lot smarter than me. So that bit was quite hard. But the actual becoming a doctor part, I think the training, it's done so gradually that the bits that you think you'd find hard about being a doctor, like dealing with people dying and dealing with people being really sick, it kind of happens so gradually through your training that you're taught how to deal with it a little bit better.
Oh, it's quite interesting. Yeah, and thank you for being honest as well, because I think we've definitely got some very bright students in this room, so I can imagine maybe the similar happening.
Yeah, definitely learn how to fail now, because so many of my friends really struggled in uni with that.
What GCSEs and A levels did you have to do?
So I did the triple science GCSE. I don't know if that's still on offer. Yeah, so definitely did the triple science, and then sort of all the standard GCSE, and then I picked to do history as an option, Spanish as an option, and the triple science you had to pick at that point. You couldn't just do it. And then for A levels, I did physics, chemistry, biology, maths for AS, and then dropped physics and did further maths AS in A level as well. You don't have to do that. So the only one that the medical schools really want is you to have chemistry A level. Some of them want biology as well, but if you really like Spanish or you really like English or you really like history, none of the medical schools are going to turn you down for having that as an A level, because they like to see that you've got other interests.
Thank you.
Do any of those interest you?
That sounds Spanish.
Yeah, Spanish. Do you have a question? So we've got Lily May's joined us. Do you have a question, Lily May?
What made you become a doctor?
So I wanted to be a doctor quite late. So I wanted to be a vet all the way through school, and if not a vet, a marine biologist. And it was as I got my AS level results, I went, oh, actually, anything smaller than a guinea pig and bigger than a large pony, I don't really like. And I really like my waitressing job and I like talking to people, so maybe I should be a doctor instead. And luckily, I have a very sensible mum who forced me not to apply to university in my year 13 year because I was picking medical schools based on how close they were to aquariums and zoos and things like that and really silly things. And my mum sort of said, stop being so stupid, take a year out and just apply in your gap year and just do it all there so you can get some experience and get some sort of medical knowledge about whether you want to be a doctor or not.
And is that what you did?
Yeah, so I took a gap year after year 13, which I was always going to do, but I just didn't apply until my gap year. And it was really good because the head of sixth at the time, she was really good and was still happy to look over my personal statement and things. So I don't feel like I failed by doing it in my gap year. Definitely do a gap year. It's a good idea.
What did you do in your gap year to make sure that it was setting you up to find out if you wanted to be a doctor?
So I worked as a waitress a lot of the time, but I also worked for a care agency. So I used to go and be a carer for people with learning disabilities or physical disabilities. So I did that for sort of 7 or 8 months. And then I went travelling for 3 months as well. So I went out to South Africa and then I went to Namibia and worked in a hospital, which was really cool. So, and that was with someone who was a GP in the UK who'd gone out to Namibia for a year. So she could kind of talk to me about what working as a doctor in the UK was like, as well as giving me some stuff working abroad.
Oh, I got that.
That sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
So what university did you end up applying to?
So I applied to Leicester, East Anglia, Bristol and Cardiff, and then I got offers from I got an offer from Leicester, and then because Leicester was my top choice, I sort of shut down my offer to Bristol because I didn't want to wait to hear from them because I wanted to go to Leicester. I would say the most important thing when picking is look at the course structure. So some of them have what's called PBL courses or problem-based learning, which works for some people, doesn't work for other people, but basically you get given you're going to learn about headaches this week and then you have to go off and do all the research and it's very self-guided, which I thought for me, I didn't really like that idea. And I quite liked Leicester's course because it was really hands-on. So I taught at the Leicester course a couple of years ago on another year out. And as a course, it's got really good sort of, you get given like a body and you do dissection from your first year, you see patients from your second week, you go and work sort of on the wards for your first couple of weeks of university. So I really liked that part of Leicester.
Were you, before you thought, oh, I want to become a doctor, were you afraid of blood at any time?
I've always been all right with gory things and was very much pushing to do dissection in biology at school. But having said that, I watched my dog have blood taken and almost fainted on my work experience. And then my dad got a really nasty injury on his leg and I almost fainted looking at that. So I thought I was really good with gore and then it turns out I was a little bit fainty, but have got better.
Good question. Did you in your course, at your university course, did you have am I correct in thinking that you have a body?
Yeah, so not many universities do, but that was one of the reasons I picked Leicester. So Leicester, you have a body between 8 of you, and you dissect the whole body over the first 2 years of med school. So you even dissect the brain, which is really unusual these days. Most places you don't dissect the brain anymore because sort of there's concerns about infections, but Leicester you do everything and it's really hands-on. But wow. Again, it's something.
Yeah.
Have you noticed ones that have a body and ones that don't?
So I went to Swansea this weekend and they do a lot with cadavers as well. Yeah.
I think Leicester, Swansea, Cambridge and maybe Brighton, I think are the 4 main ones that do it now. But yeah, I would say it is invaluable. I don't think you can learn anatomy completely from a textbook, and it's quite cool to say that you've dissected a body in a really gross way, but it's also, I don't know, it makes you respect people quite early on because you've had this very kind person that's donated their body for you to learn off of, and it kind of emphasizes what you're learning and why you're learning it. Well, it did to me anyway.
Did you cope with that? There was no fainting for that?
Not for me. There are numerous stories in the dissection lab of other people fainting, and there are now very strict guidelines on what you're allowed to wear going in, because there was once a case of a girl wearing very, very high heels who tripped over and ended up on the body.
Oh.
So yes. But yes, no, I didn't ever faint for that one. It weirdly makes you quite hungry. It's the smell, it's like, because it's all formaldehyde, it's the smell of it makes you quite hungry. It's like a well-known thing, but it's a bit weird when you come out being like, oh, I could really murder a sandwich right now.
Talking of which, this is like a lunch and learn, so do eat, because obviously you'll have your lessons at 2. You got a question?
Yeah, what extra stuff did you like do in your free time to add on to your application?
So I did, what did I do? I did quite a lot of walking and cooking. I did dog agility and somehow managed to convert that into how good a communicator I was in my personal statement. Communicate with a dog. That was one of my things. I did quite a lot of teaching at Bromham Primary School because my mum's a teacher there, well, was a teacher there. So I did like a science club, a cooking club and things like that as part of it. But to be honest, anything, as long as you can talk about it and say what you've learned from it and also just why you find it enjoyable, anything you've done is helpful.
Did you link it to things like the NHS values and when you wrote your personal statement?
A little bit, yeah. They weren't as much of a thing when I applied, but yeah, that's really helpful. If you can directly link it to sort of some of the things that you know are important in healthcare, that would definitely give you sort of a bit of an edge, or how you think it would help you in your future career is really important.
And do you think the experiences you got in the gap year, I mean, they were huge compared to some students that would have come straight from sixth form applying. So do you think that made kind of, was that probably one of the reasons why you got through? Because it's very competitive, isn't it?
So, but I had my interview before I actually went on my trip. So I could talk about what I was going to do, but I didn't have any actual practical experience. So you don't need it there. I think I would strongly advocate taking a gap year before going to uni, whatever you do, purely because, so my year was the last year before they increased the university fees. So we had lots of people who came straight in and hadn't taken a gap year. And it was very noticeable, particularly on a course like medicine, the difference in maturity level of just having that extra year to kind of grow up a little bit, know what you want to do, know how to work, things like that. So I would definitely say take a gap year anyway. Just go and have some fun for a year. You've worked really hard to get where you've got to. Just have a break and relax and earn some money for a year.
You said you had your interview before you went and did your experiences, but you applied to the time, but you did apply during the gap year, but you had your interview
so I applied
quite early on, isn't it?
Yeah, it's October for medicine, or it was October. And then I went travelling I had my interview January 17th, I think, and then went travelling from the end of January to April, and then found out that I'd got a place after I got back.
What qualifications did you do?
At university, or whereabouts?
University.
So I've got what's referred to as an MBCHB, which is just it's like Master of Medicine and Surgery, or Bachelor's in Medicine and Surgery at university. So you can either do the MBCHB, or some universities offer what's an MBBS. They're exactly the same. And then since then, I've done a PG certificate in teaching, but specifically for medical education. And then I've done what's called an MRCP, which is Member of the Royal College of Physicians. And that's once you pick what sort of doctor you want to be, you have to do exams to become a member of that area's college. So if you're a surgeon, you do the MRCS. If you do if you want to be a GP, you do MRCGP, and it's kind of more specialist exams for that area.
Thank you.
So lots of exams, it keeps going.
You talk about picking what kind of doctor you want to be. Could you summarise for us all, you know, what those could be?
Yeah, so when you graduate from med school, you do what's called your foundation training. So that's to give you a really broad experience of lots of different jobs, and basically learn how to be a doctor and how to do the actual day-to-day job. And then at the end of that point, you basically make a decision, if you can at that point, about what sort of doctor you want to be. So you can be a GP, you could do psychiatry, which is looking at people's brains and sort of dealing with things like depression, schizophrenia. You can do obstetrics and gynecology, which is delivering babies and things like that. You can do surgery. You can do medicine, which is what I do, and that's still quite a broad training program, but that's kind of looking after people's hearts and people's lungs, people's stomachs, people's joints, things like that. What other ones are there? You could be a paediatrician, so looking after children is anything under paediatrics. And so then each of those different jobs have their own training pathways, and you then can go down and you do the slightly more specialist training for that.
Wow, yeah, it's so interesting. And so how many years have you kind of been qualifying for, really?
So I've been qualified for 6 years now. So I've got about another 4 years. If I went straight through, I've got another 4 years before I'm a consultant, which is kind of the most senior doctor within a hospital. If I'd become a GP, then I would have been done. So I'd do my 2 years foundation, and then if I became a GP, I'd have 3 years and then be fully qualified. But most other things in hospital, it's sort of about 5 to 7 years after you've done your 2 initial years. So it's a long time, but you do get paid for all of that, and you sort of are becoming more senior and being promoted along the way.
Have you got any more questions?
Yeah. What level of promotion do you want to reach?
So I'm going to be a consultant as my top end goal. So this is my last bit of training now, which will be the next 4 to 5 years. And then when I'm a consultant, I probably want to think about doing some management-y stuff. Definitely want to think about doing some teaching stuff as well, but that will be sort of in addition to being a doctor rather than take over my main job.
It's great to hear that your ambition, obviously you were very ambitious at school, it's great to hear that's not stopped.
No, still going.
Where are you based?
I'm actually based in Bristol now. So I moved down to Bristol a couple of years ago, so not too far away.
Yeah. Oh. And Lily May, you got a question?
How old do you want to be when you finish being a doctor?
Oh, that question changes depending on the shift, I think. Well, if you listen to the government, we're all going to retire at 68, and we probably can't retire till then. I think looking at the intensity of being a doctor, because it is quite an intense job, I don't really want to be working full-time beyond about 50, 55, which is part of the reason that actually having other things to your bow, like doing some teaching or doing some management, is a good idea, because then it means I could work maybe one day in the hospital as a doctor. I could do 1 day of teaching a week, I could do 1 day of management stuff a week, and not have sort of the intensity of having 32 patients who I look after and solely my responsibility.
When you first thought about being a doctor, did you ever think, like you were saying about the intensity, did you ever think about how intense it would be, and did you think, oh, maybe I'd like that or maybe I wouldn't?
Yes and no. I think I knew that it would be difficult, I knew that it would be quite intense, but being honest with you, I hadn't realised how intense it was. I don't think it would have made me change my mind, because I think actually the benefits I get from my job of I'm doing something scientific, which I really love learning about every day. Every single day at work is different for me. So every single day I have a new problem to solve. I have a new patient to talk to. I have a new thing to learn. I get to do quite cool things with my job that a couple of weeks ago, I had a man whose heart wasn't beating hard enough or fast enough, and he wasn't responding to our normal treatment. So I essentially had to keep him alive by punching him in the chest. You don't get to do that on a normal job, but that's what my job does involve, and it is really, really cool. I think you have to be aware that you are going to have times where you might have a family birthday that you have to say, I'm really sorry, but actually I'm working, and that you will be working night shifts and weekends for a lot of your career, but not all of your career. So in the next sort of 5 years, I would expect to stop doing night shifts and stop working weekends and things as much. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I think it wouldn't have put me off, but I don't think I fully realised how intense it was before I started. But I would still make the same decisions again to be a doctor.
Thank you.
Questions? Yeah, go on. It's probably just what time have we got? Got a couple of minutes. So yeah, go on, Ellie.
So what is like your favourite shift to work? Like, which would you say is the easiest one?
Easiest or favourite, because that's different.
Well, why don't you tell us both?
So I do both. So easiest shift is my lovely normal day where I go into my geriatrics ward, which is an old people ward. I do what's called a board round. So I sit down with the physiotherapist, the occupational therapist, the nurses, and we discuss all of the patients to work out what they need and how we're going to get them home and how we're going to get them better. I will quite often have a nice chat with a family about how I think their relative's doing and sort of important things for their care. I might go to a clinic, so I might go and sit and talk to people who are at home but are coming into hospital for a clinic. So I have that nice time. So that's quite a nice easy day because it's quite nice and chilled. It's what I really enjoy doing. It's interesting. I've got a lovely boss who I work for. In terms of sort of my funnest shift, I am a bit of a weirdo that I quite like night shifts, because we spend a lot of our night shifts down in the A&E department, sort of supporting them and looking after really sick patients. We quite often will have like a cardiac arrest every now and then, which is horrible because it's someone's heart stopping, but actually it's quite exciting because if you can get it restarted, then you feel like you've done a really good job and you get some really good teamwork. And also I get to sort of see new patients at the front door there, which is quite interesting because you're the first doctor to see them. So there's lots of problem solving of working out why they've come to hospital and what you need to do and can you get them home or are they going to have to stay in hospital, that sort of thing. So it's really varied.
It varies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sounds like it varies quite a lot.
Yeah, it does.
Is it made you think you want to apply on the law? Or are you now feeling a bit, oh?
When I went to Swansea, they did like quite in detail talk about what it would entail, and I can't lie, I was sat on the car, like in the car on the way home, just like, because I was like, I knew it was going to be intense, but I don't think you realise how, and it's a long time really as well.
Yeah, so if you're thinking about it, I would say go for it. Because even if you enjoy science and you like talking to people and care about people, then you will be a fantastic doctor. Be aware that it is intense, but actually medical school prepares you for that intensity. So it's not like, oh, I'm in sixth form, this is lovely, to boom, I've now been treated like a doctor in medical school and I have no idea what the hell's going on. It's quite a gradual process. So do go for it. There's lots of flexibility now, and it's getting much more flexible. A lot of it because actually, as women, we're now making up more than 50% of the workforce. So they're having to make it more flexible. And also post-COVID, they're having to make things more flexible because it was tough and lots of people are needing time out post-COVID, so they are being much more flexible. I would never say don't do it, but I would just say be aware of what to expect and make sure that you keep up any hobbies that you have now throughout med school. That would be my, and don't work after dinner time. That would be my other tip. Stop work at dinner.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much. That's
No worries.
really insightful. It's brilliant. Thank you.